Hey there, hope you're well. Welcome back. I want to talk today about, for a DevOps engineer, what does a day in the life look like? What kind of day-to-day activities are you going to be doing? Let's have a look, but I've got to give you some assumptions because in case you don't already know, the role title DevOps engineer is in many ways terrible. DevOps is not a job, it is actually more of a philosophy, a framework that is actually practiced not just by so-called DevOps engineers, but also by developers, even product teams, InfoSec. Everybody's involved in DevOps, not only DevOps engineers. So let's clarify this and make a bit of a better description. We're going to run with some assumptions here, and this is most DevOps engineers are like this. Some of them will be slightly different if you're a platform engineer or an SRE, but on the whole, this is the job from most DevOps engineers. Firstly, mainly, increasing dev velocity by helping them better self-serve, give them a platform, and better deploy. But this is the main one, increase developer velocity. That's the whole point of DevOps. And DevOps engineers can help to do that by creating a platform that they can better self-serve from. And when I say better deploy, a lot of that is, for example, pipelines. And the other thing that's kind of implicit and just assumed, because basically nobody else in the company will do it, is to look after the infrastructure. So to build it, to maintain it, and in general, overall, make sure that it's reliable. That falls on to the plate of the DevOps engineer. It's not really, no one will point at developers if there's a problem with infra reliability, and obviously InfoSec is not responsible for that, product teams aren't. It comes down to us, DevOps engineers. So with this whole thing in mind here, this is a very rough assumption of what you might be expected to be responsible for as a DevOps engineer. Let's look at the day-to-day, day-in-the-life activities. So it's all on this one page, and it's not in order of importance or anything like that, but this is pretty much everything that you'd be expected to do. And it really depends. Every company has got a different definition, so some companies you will spend more time doing some activities than others, but in general this is what you'll be expected to do. The percentages will differ, so I'm not going to fix this because it really depends where you are. And this is something you can ask in the interview as well. How much time will I be expected to do X compared to Y compared to Z? So first of all, there's the inevitable meetings, and when I'm talking about meetings, I'm talking about your own team meetings, particularly stand-ups, but also other agile ceremonies. You'll also have meetings with developers, could possibly include the POs in those developer teams, InfoSec, and even possibly stakeholders. Now you may be shielded a little bit from stakeholders, or you may not. You may need to interface with them directly, especially when gathering requirements. They may try to pass them through the PO, but often it's better to go direct. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of meetings here. In general, it's all about alignment. I know a lot of both DevOps engineers and developers, they don't like meetings, but you really need to embrace meetings. They do have a purpose. Of course, they can get out of control, but with experience you can learn how to better manage them and ensure people stay on point and get things done quickly. It's all about self-organizing, and no one's going to chair those meetings to be efficient for you. You've got to play your own part in that. So meetings, they're necessary and inevitable, and you can get a lot out of them as well. So there's nothing wrong with meetings. Now, meetings are collaboration, but when I say collaboration here, I'm talking about kind of like non-meeting collaboration. So for example, developers might need your assistance in debugging. They might not be able to debug an app all on their own, and you have a crossover of skills with them, and they need your help, especially where infrastructure starts to get implicated and they're just not sure what to do, so they may need you to sit down with them to help. But other collaboration as well is generally educating. So if you understand the whole philosophy of DevOps and about breaking down silos, it's also about group learnings, not just individual learnings. It's about whole organization learning from different things that you encounter. And part of that is you need to educate the broader company base as well and bring it back, and also educate them about what you're doing and what's coming up and how they can better help themselves by understanding a little more about your own world. So that's all part of educating. Architecting. So there's a whole bunch of activities under architecting. Now you might think, well, engineers build, they don't architect. And that's true and it's not true. So you may have a dedicated architect in your team. He may be called an architect, could be called a platform architect, or it may just be called a DevOps lead. So you may delegate this away and one, maybe two people take responsibility. It could even be that you have a developer architect who does most of the architecture for the company. It really depends on your company. But ultimately, every engineer also has to do at least some architecting, even if it's a small amount. So what does that involve? That involves gathering requirements, doing some discovery. So it could be the requirements are not clear, you need to do discovery, or it could be that the requirements are actually clear, but you need to do some research. So there's a little bit of back and forth between requirements and discovery. And then as part of architecting, you've got to make some decisions, and typically this is all about trade-offs. So if you look more into system design and infrastructure design, you can learn more about that. But yeah, in general, there's trade-offs. So there's always some limiting factor. It could be money, or it could be some other priority that you have, but you typically have to prioritize one thing over another, and that's what trade-offs are, and that's part of the decision-making process. There's also obviously planning as well. Planning the tasks, the build tasks that are needed to deliver on whatever it is that you're architecting. So also there's coding. Now a lot of DevOps engineers feel that, oh, most of my job should be coding. So these are your deliverables, these are planned deliverables, part of the roadmap. And the roadmap also, by the way, you probably know that there's continual improvement and automation, so it includes all of that as well. Migrations, dealing with technical debt, all of that stuff, but the delivery part is coding. And I say here that this includes, for example, when you're doing pair programming, so that's all part of the time and effort that's involved, and also the code review process as well. I'm including that under coding. So any DevOps engineer who thinks his job should be 90% coding, to be honest, that's just really just a bit of an ego there, and it's really what you want it to be, but that's not the job. All this other stuff is part of the job. Coding is just one part of it. And also, what I would say is, a typical DevOps engineer, not at senior level, because at senior level you're doing less hands-on, but from junior to mid-level, you should be expecting to be participating in either coding or the code review process on a daily basis. I would say typically you are committing code daily. If you're not, then you're not really doing DevOps. Okay, so you should be doing, whether the code is even just Terraform, infrastructure as code, or Ansible, configuration management, or something like Bash or Python, you should be doing at least some commits every single day. And if you're not really doing DevOps. You're not. If you're doing code, then you're being deterministic, and it's all part of the DevOps philosophy. So definitely, this is a daily activity. Then there's ops. So ops is stuff that is non-automated. So either it can't be automated, or you decide, so some things can't be automated. For example, sometimes you're setting up, let's say, authentication, and you need to copy and paste a code block out of the Azure portal or something like that. And well, potentially you could automate that, but there's also things that you are not worth automating because you do it so infrequently. It would take more time to automate it. You wouldn't actually save time, you'd actually increase the amount of time by trying to automate it. So yeah, non-automated stuff, configuring, patching is another. Sometimes that's manual. Reports, so sometimes you've got to do one-off reports. If the reports are regular, then it's probably something you should automate, and I wouldn't call this ops. Basically, it's tedium. That's how I would describe this kind of work. tedium. So it's something that you've got to be careful about, but it has to be done manually, and it's just got to be done. And then there's other admin. So there's tickets like on your Jira or Trello board, your sprint board or your Kanban board. It's absolutely necessary. I would include docs, documentation as well. Now, I've called documentation admin, but you might think it should belong in another category, because documentation is not just one of those things that you have to do and some people think it's not valuable, but that's not true. It is absolutely valuable, but by the same token, don't go overboard with documentation. Some people go overboard. You see, there's one end of the spectrum says, well, your code is documentation, and that's true to an extent, but your code needs to be complemented really with good documentation, but at the same time, keep it minimal. Don't go too far. So I've called it admin, but some people may argue it's not admin, it's actually perhaps part of code. And then there's things like HR. You've got you're getting your pay slips and getting other documentation from HR, and maybe filing timesheets if you work in consulting perhaps, or you just have an employer that wants to know what you do every day and you have to report on it. So there's general admin. You can't escape from that. It's part of every job. And there's incidents. All of this stuff up here is not really, none of it is really interrupt work, apart from maybe urgent collaboration. But incidents is interrupt work. They just arise out of nowhere. You don't expect them, at least the timing you don't expect, and typically involves troubleshooting. And that's just incident management is part of being a DevOps engineer. You can't avoid it, whether it's on call or whether you're actually during office hours at work. Maybe you dedicate a person in your team to do that. I know that's what some organizations do because they don't want to interrupt the entire team, so you do a rotation. Or it could be that you're just permanently or non-permanently embedded with a developer team, and you could actually spend a lot of time doing incidents. That's not really the best use of embedding, in my opinion, but sometimes that's just the way it happens, that developers try to delegate all their incidents to someone who is embedded, but I don't think that's right. But in general, incidents involve troubleshooting, and it's part of being a DevOps engineer. And then there's self-training. Now, most companies, I would say, actually don't. They mean well, and they say, look, dedicate half a day per week to training. But most companies, it's just not possible. What will typically happen is on a Friday, especially if you have a company that says we don't deploy on Fridays, which many companies say that, then, or Fridays, like most jobs, will tend to be quieter days of the week. People are slowing down, it's just natural. It can be a great time to do some self-training, to do some experiments, build something out. I don't know, set up modify your developer environment, or learn about X, Y, or Z, maybe watch a couple of videos. Typically on a Friday, it's just the way it works out, some self-training. But yeah, so I hope you found this useful. This is typically what a DevOps engineer will, a day in the life, day-to-day activities that they will do. And yeah, so just one more thing to say. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel. We're growing. We've got about 30 videos and only a few subscribers, so please really welcome you along for the journey. And thanks for watching, and take care. Bye-bye.